Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webinar on selling to the City of Edmonton. I am Rebecca Calder, the Business Services Coordinator here at BusinessLink. Thank you for joining us today. At BusinessLink, we are honored to provide services to all entrepreneurs and specialty services to our immigrant and Indigenous entrepreneurs. We are inclusive in our cultural understanding and awareness of the histories of our country. With that, we will start this event with a land acknowledgement to recognize all of Alberta. We want to acknowledge that in the province of Alberta, we are situated on the traditional territories of Treaties 4, 6, 7, 8, and 10, ancestral homeland of diverse nations groups, Métis, and Indigenous people whose ancestors have walked to this land since time immemorial, and whose histories, languages, and cultures continue to influence our vibrant community. We pay respects to the Indigenous people of this land, past, present, and future, while recognizing their cultural heritage, beliefs, and relationship to the land on which we reside. So thank you for coming today. Roger Lockwood and Michael Stankowski will be joining us to present Selling to the City of Edmonton. If you'd like to ask a question during the webinar, please click Q&A in the meeting controls and type a message into the question box. There may be questions asked throughout the presentation, and we can encourage you to participate. Simply type your answers in the chat box to all participants. The information provided in this session is for general knowledge and should not be taken as professional advice. So it's my pleasure to introduce our presenters today. First up, we have Roger Lockwood, Director of Procurement at the City of Edmonton, who tells me that his background is not interesting from a procurement perspective and will not be providing you a biography. Also, we have Michael Stankowski, SCMP, Senior Buyer at the City of Edmonton. And Michael did provide a biography. He's very interesting. He is a supply chain management professional who joined the City of Edmonton in 2016. He has extensive experience in competitive bid law, contracting, and supplier management. He has worked in procurement for 10 years, both in the public and private sectors, and brings his experience from multiple industries, including education, utility, and government. Michael holds a Supply Chain Management Designation and is currently working on a bachelor's degree in management. Thank you for joining us today. And I'm going to hand it over to our two guests. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much, Rebecca. Thanks, everyone. Good morning and welcome to the City of Edmonton's Selling to the City session. Michael had such a great bio that I could not compare to that. So that's why my bio was quite limited. So Michael and I will split this meeting today and provide you some information. So certainly appreciate you taking the time to attend this. And I'm going to provide you a bit of an overview as to the agenda. So in this presentation, we'll cover the following items: an overview of the City of Edmonton's structure and purchasing methods, the different types of procurement methods used at the City of Edmonton, as well as some information about SAP Ariba, which is what's called our procure to pay software. We will also provide you some additional information and tips about responding to the postings and opportunities that we put out, as well as some additional resources. And we'll certainly have some time at the end of the presentation for any questions you may have. As far as the City of Edmonton structure goes, the Mayor and City Council govern the city as a corporation. They set the policy, they set the budget and direction to their one employee of the city being the city manager. The city manager ensures administration, carries out council's direction, and administers public services. With about 14,000 employees, the city administration is divided into 8 different departments. Those are listed on the screen here, but I'll just identify those. And each is responsible for a particular aspect of the public service that the city provides. So those departments are the financial and corporate services, integrated infrastructure services, city operations, urban form and strategic development, communications and engagement, citizen services, and employee services. As it lists on here, so the City of Edmonton has a population of about 900,000 residents, and the region itself with the suburbs has over 1.3 million people using the different facilities and infrastructure within the city. So the city structure itself under the city manager is broken into a hierarchy of responsibility, starting with the department level. Each department that I listed in the previous slide consists of a handful of branches, and there are multiple sections within each branch, which is responsible for specific business activities. And the reason this is being covered is because we work within corporate services, corporate procurement and supply services. And we provide this procurement service working with the business areas to get the services that they require. We do have some additional information available on the City of Edmonton website. So that's edmonton.ca. Within here, I've got a couple of links that I wanted to just share with you. So for information, more information about the departments and the branches themselves and the work that they would do, you can go into edmonton.ca, and I'm just showing a link here. Within there, there's a departments and branches section. And this is where it will provide additional information about each department, which is listed here. And then you can go into those departments and get more information on the specific branches and the different work that they do, because it is quite a variety of work. The city provides approximately 73 services that are very variable. So it's I can appreciate it's a bit complex to folks. And so we try to provide some information with the website on edmonton.ca to help with that information. There's an additional resource available. It's also about who do I get to, who do I talk to. So there's a corporate directory search, again, on edmonton.ca. You can search by particular branches or departments or individuals themselves. So, and get their contact email and their contact phone number. In regards to, as I mentioned, the corporate procurement and supply services. So that's a branch that Michael and I are a part of, and we're within the financial and corporate services department. And we're really the centralized supply chain management and tendering authority for the City of Edmonton. So we help those branches and business areas, we refer to them as. We help them to establish contracts to get the goods and services or the construction services that they require. So just some stats around the contracts and spends for the City of Edmonton. In 2019, we established about 620 new contracts or procurements. And that was about value of about $1.7 billion. The contracts that were already established and were being managed within the city in 2019 had a approximate value of $7.7 billion. And that's over a period of time because contracts are established over, typically over 3 to 5 years or potentially longer. As city employees, it's our responsibility to strive to get the best possible value for the money. And the city takes great pride in its purchasing practices, and our staff are committed to providing transparency, accountability, sustainability, and value for money. I'll turn it over to, sorry, working at home. I'll turn it over to Michael, and he can go through some more specifics relating to the purchasing process.
Thank you, Roger. Hi, everyone. I'm Michael Stankowski. Thank you for joining us today on Selling to the City. I'm going to talk to you more about the procurement side of things and how the city goes about purchasing goods and services. A lot of people do ask, why does the city do things so weird? Why is it so hard to sell to the city? And the answer to that is trade agreements. In the public sector, we are bound by trade agreements signed at the provincial and federal level that provide guidance on how public sector entities must buy goods, services, and construction. They ensure that all public sector entities are following the same rules, and they also show our vendors how we're procuring in a fair, open, and transparent manner. The City of Edmonton is considered a part of the MASH, what's called the MASH sector. That just includes all levels of government, schools, hospitals, and the like. These trade agreements state that above certain dollar value thresholds, a competitive procurement must take place for the purchase. And there are 3 trade agreements that we are bound by. The first one is the New West Partnership Trade Agreement, otherwise known as NWPTA or NUEPTA. The other one is the Canadian Free Trade Agreement, or CFTA, or some people call it KEFTA. I like to say CFTA. And the other one, which is a really long one, is the Canadian European Union Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, for short, CETA. So we know that Edmonton has a diverse business community with suppliers and contractors who can provide quality products, services, and equipment, as well as skilled labor that we need. Unfortunately, due to the trade agreements, we can't specify or prefer local bidders when we're following these trade agreements. However, these trade agreements also allow Edmonton companies to go out to other areas in the country and also provide their goods and services outside of Edmonton and outside of Alberta. The first trade agreement, the New West Partnership Trade Agreement, is a provincial level agreement, and it's signed by the Alberta government, BC, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. These ones have the lowest thresholds in terms of when a competitive procurement is required, and probably the most common one that we use day to day here at the city. So for goods and services, the threshold is $75,000. So anything related to goods and services that's over $75,000 must go through a competitive procurement. And for construction services, that value is $200,000. So anything above 200 has to go through a competitive procurement. For the Canadian Free Trade Agreement, or CFTA, that's a national trade agreement that's between the 10 provinces and the 3 territories, and it's signed at the federal level. And the threshold for that one for goods and services is $105,700, and for construction is $264,200. And the reason why those limits are so specific is because those limits change every 2 years based on inflation. So they start to get very specific in the dollars as the years go on. For CETA, that's a European Union trade agreement that Canada has signed, and it's between the 28 countries of the European Union and Canada. And the thresholds on that is for goods and services, $366,200, and for construction, it's $9.1 million. So anything above those thresholds, the city has to issue a competitive procurement in order to select a bidder for those goods and services. Anything below $75,000, the city can single source or sole source or select a direct award. When we're dealing with competitive procurements, we always post those opportunities on the Alberta Purchasing Connection or on our new procurement site, SAP Ariba. Next slide, Roger. So in alignment with the trade agreements, the city expects that all procurements will be conducted in a fair, transparent, and accountable manner that achieves the best value for the city and supports council's environmental, social, and economic objectives. Over the last 3 years, the CPSS branch undertook a full review and redesign of the city's procurement, contract management, and the payment processes. And we've established new guiding principles and procedures and processes to ensure the city is following the best practices and is complying with the different trade agreements that we are bound by. On the screen, you've got the 4 different methods that the city uses to purchase goods and services. We have competitive, non-competitive, invitational, and self-serve. For competitive procurements, it's used when contract values are expected to exceed trade agreement thresholds, but we also can use it if it's under the trade agreement thresholds as well. A competitive procurement process is always done with the full involvement of the CPSS branch. For non-competitive, invitational, and self-serve procurements, these are only used when the value of the contract is going to be under trade agreement thresholds, and city employees in the different sections and branches that Roger had walked through previously can select the suppliers that they want to work with directly. And these processes typically have very little involvement from the CPSS branch.
May I jump in here for a moment?
Yeah.
It's Rebecca. I just have a quick question. Does the city try to buy local when it's possible to, given these trade agreements?
Yes, so anything under $75,000, we're not bound by that rule to not prefer local. So anything under 75, we do try and buy local as much as possible.
Fantastic. And another question, just from the same person, I think we should get out of the way at this stage, is Things like the Edmonton Police Service and the library, for example, are they all wrapped under this umbrella, or would you go to them separately?
They are also bound by the trade agreements, but they are separate, and they're doing their own procurement now.
Okay, and is that available on the SAP Ariba, or would you have to contact someone specifically at one of those agencies?
They should be posting all of their opportunities on the Alberta Purchasing Connection website.
Okay.
They are currently not on SAP Ariba, but I believe they're going to be migrating to SAP Ariba in the near future.
Fantastic. And for everybody, I'm just sharing those two links in the chat. And I'm going back on mute. Thank you, gentlemen.
No problem. I'll just provide some more information on the Alberta Purchasing Connection website. So that's a provincially run website where all government agencies in Alberta post their public opportunities. So anybody who is bound by trade agreements, that's where they're going to post their opportunities. So it's a good site to check out if you're looking for different opportunities in Edmonton, Calgary, Red Deer, or any other county in Alberta. Two other terms that are commonly used in procurement is sole source or single source, and these are non-competitive process terminology. So a sole source is when there's only one single supply of a good or service in the market, so there's really only one vendor that we can go to. The trade agreements do have rules around when the city can use that and how that can be used for purchasing goods and services. The other one for single and sole source, or sorry, for single source is we have multiple supply or multiple vendors that can provide a supply of the goods or service. But the city has just chosen to either go to one or a couple of the vendors that are available. And those would only be used if we're under the threshold of $75,000. For non-competitive procurements, if we're using that process, those opportunities are not posted on the Alberta Purchasing Connection website. Only competitive opportunities are posted. So those are internal decisions that the city makes to, directly go to specific suppliers for the good or service, and they'll work with them either through email or phone calls. So there's nothing publicly posted on those kind of opportunities. The city may do a direct award as a non-competitive, or we may do an invitational where we'll invite, 1, 2, or maybe 3 suppliers to provide quotations, and then we'll select the best price and go from there. And again, that only applies to procurements that are under $75,000. We also have a process in place, what we call self-serve. This one has no involvement from CPSS branches. It's strictly at the department and branch levels. So if the value of the purchase is under $25,000, including GST, they can just issue a purchase order to the vendor that they're going to be working with.
All right, and we have a couple of questions in the same vein here.
Yeah.
If the person if a small business, wants to reach out directly to a department for one of these kind of self-serve bids, is there an online directory of people whom they should contact?
Yes, so Roger shared a link previously on the contact us page, which has different contact information at the different groups. So they can reach out through those areas to, do an introduction and kind of get themselves in the mind of the city staff.
Okay, excellent. I hope that answers your questions, Andy and Chris. And I'm out.
Okay. Roger, next slide, please. So as I mentioned previously, all competitive purchases for the city are posted on our SAP Ariba Discovery, but also on Alberta Purchasing Connection. We call these opportunities internally at the city a sourcing event, and they can come in different forms. We do post a notice for these opportunities, like I said, on the Alberta Purchasing Connection website with instructions on how to access SAP Ariba. There's links usually provided as well to the direct event that you can access and read the information. There are a variety of different opportunities available, some that do lead to a direct purchase or a contract with the city. And there are some opportunities that don't directly lead right to a contract or a purchase. So notices that don't directly lead to a purchase or a contract from the city are things like a pre-qualification or request for information. And I'll get into what those specifically are in a minute here. And notices that do lead to a purchase or contract almost immediately in some cases is tenders and RFPs. So a pre-qualification doesn't lead to an immediate purchase. We use pre-qualifications to essentially pre-qualify bidders. And so we'll put out a a notice or an opportunity for bidders to apply. And really, we're just pre-qualifying bidders on various experience or qualification requirements. After we've done that pre-qualification, we'll follow that up with a tender or an RFP, and where we'll invite those pre-qualified bidders to further bid on the potential work for the defined period of time. Or if there's other work that arises, we may use those pre-qualifications and ask bidders to bid on that specific work as it comes up. For an RFI, it's called Request for Information. So this does not lead to an immediate purchase as well. This is more for the city requesting information from the marketplace regarding requirements around a good or service. So if we're not quite sure, don't have experience in a particular commodity or service, we may reach out to the marketplace and ask some questions to get more information. So once we collect that information from the marketplace, we may use it to develop a tender or RFP for the future to actually purchase the good or service that we're asking about, or depending on what we get, we may choose not to proceed any further with that. So we could do an RFI and just stop the process there, or it could lead to more notices being posted in the future. For tenders and RFPs, I'm going to start with the tender. The tender usually is designed when the city knows exactly what it's looking for. So we have specific goods or services in mind and a specific way of doing it. Typically, they'll include specifications explaining what the city is exactly looking for. If there's delivery timelines, we'll include the delivery timelines as well. We'll ask for pricing from the bidders to be submitted. They typically do have mandatory requirements. Some examples will be like a certificate of recognition around safety, or if it's engineering services that we're requiring, we may ask bidders to be in good standing with the PEGA. We'll also include things around bid submission requirements. So we'll tell you what you need to submit, whether it's a insurance certificate proving you have insurance, WCB clearance letters. If there's bonds required, we'll tell you what kind of bonds and the requirements around bonds. So there's lots of different submission requirements that we may ask for as well. We always include a copy of our contract for review during the bidding period as well for bidders. But these, under a tender, these are not open for negotiation. So if you're submitting a bid under a tender, you're basically accepting that contract as is. And tenders are usually evaluated 100% price, so everything's just based on the price, but it's not always the case. Sometimes we will mix in other evaluation criteria. So we may ask for experience or references or methodology or other items. Really depends on the procurement and the type of service that we're asking for. So you may see a mix of different evaluation criteria, or you may see just 100% price. For an RFP, typically it's a concept that the city has, but just doesn't know how to accomplish it. So we're really asking bidders to provide us with a proposal on how they're going to approach the work. We'll include a description of what the city's looking for, or what they need accomplished, any potential schedule or deadlines that need to be met. The pricing could be a lump sum price for the whole project, or it could be different phases. We could even do an hourly rate contract where we manage it based on hourly rates. RFPs could also include mandatory requirements similar as what I described, so core or any other type of certification requirements. If it's needed, we may list that as a mandatory requirement. We'll also provide bid submission instructions. So again, providing WCB insurance or responses or other documentation as needed. And again, we also include the copy of the contract for your review. The big difference between an RFP and a tender around the contract is that the contract can be negotiated. The way that an RFP is structured, it does allow for some negotiations between both parties before award is made, so that both parties are happy with the contract. In terms of evaluation criteria, it's always going to be mixed. You're never going to see 100% price evaluation on an RFP. We're always going to include other elements in that evaluation, such as approach and methodology, or experience, or references. And Roger, next slide. So things that are typically included in a competitive procurement or a sourcing event document when you access it is instructions, mandatory requirements, the evaluation criteria, submission requirements, description of the work, any schedule or timelines, contract documents, and general conditions. So the instructions that are provided are just guidelines telling you how to submit your bid and provide you an overview of the whole process and things that you're agreeing to or may be bound to by submitting a bid. Mandatory requirements are things that must be provided in order for your bid to be considered. So if you aren't able to meet a mandatory requirement and you still submit a bid, your bid may be rejected because you aren't able to meet those mandatory requirements. A common mandatory requirement for services or construction is a proof of certificate of recognition or small employer certificate of recognition. Mandatory requirements for goods may be, we could have certain size requirements where we need, the product to be only 4 feet wide because the space that it's going into is only 4 feet wide. So there might be some mandatory requirements around that as well. In terms of evaluation criteria, these are the exact items that the evaluation committee will be basing their decision on and how much each is weighted. So you'll see, price is worth 20% of the evaluation, experience is worth 50%. It's basically just communicating to you what's important to us for this particular procurement and where you can focus your time when you're preparing your bid. Submission requirements will either be items required to support the evaluation process, such as staff resumes or items required in order to proceed with the contract, and things like proof of insurance or WCB. The description of requirements or the scope of work will tell you what the city is looking for. It's important to ensure that when you're reading that description of work or scope of work, that you can provide exactly what we're asking for. If you're not able to provide exactly what you're asking for, you can ask the city if we're willing to accept alternative products or solutions prior to the closing date of the RFP. We don't always provide it, but sometimes we do. Schedule and timelines. If there's specific deadlines that we have to meet or timelines that we have to meet, we'll provide them in the sourcing event, whether it's a tender or an RFP. And we may include suggested timelines or milestones that need to be met. And as I mentioned before, the contract documents and general conditions are always provided so that you know what you'll know what you will be expected to sign once the contract's awarded. It also gives you the opportunity to review it and see if you agree to that contract before the award stage of the RFP. And like I said, these are provided on all sourcing events that we issue at the city. So some tips when you're responding to an RFP is read everything. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. They are very long and boring to read when you're going through a sourcing event. It's a lot of very complicated wording at times, but make sure you do read everything in an RFP or a tender document so that you understand exactly what you need to do and how the process is going to work. If you don't understand something or you're not quite sure what something means, you can definitely ask questions to the city. As well, if you don't necessarily agree with something in the RFP, if a particular requirement just doesn't quite make sense for the work, you can definitely ask the city to change that. There is a way to ask questions and there's processes in place to ask questions. So definitely follow that and do so. Do not contact anyone other than the person listed in the event for questions. All events do have a method of asking questions and they have contact information in place. All communication needs to go through CPSS. So any information provided by CPSS is usually done in the form of an addendum on the event. And that's just to ensure that anybody accessing the event has the same information. If you're speaking with somebody outside of the event that wasn't part of it or not listed on the sourcing event, you may get information that's not correct and you may be submitting something that's not exactly what we're looking for. Also note the closing date of the RFP. We do have timelines in place for all of our RFPs and there is a deadline for submission and it's a date and a time. And we will not accept anything outside of that date and time. All of our submissions for an RFP or a tender need to be received through the SAP system. So we no longer accept email bids or mailed in bids. Everything has to come through SAP Ariba. And when you're in SAP Ariba, there's actually a countdown clock in the top right corner that tells you how much time you have left to submit a bid. Once that clock reaches 0, the RFP closes and you're not able to submit a bid anymore. So it's important to make sure that you submit your bid before that closing date and time. And also take a look at the evaluation criteria. All of our events do have the criteria, so what we're evaluating and how we're going to evaluate it. So all the scoring definitions and how we're going to apply the scoring are listed in the sourcing events. And it's important to read that and understand it so that you know how your bid's going to be evaluated. And that way you can write your proposal in a better way to fit that criteria and maybe be successful. So in addition to complying with existing laws, bylaws, codes, you have to complete all the sections and follow all the instructions included in each RFP or tender. Sourcing events often do include mandatory requirements. If you're unable to meet that mandatory, like I mentioned, you can consider requesting a change to that requirement by contacting the person listed in the event prior to the close of questions. The city will consider any request to change a requirement, but we'll only address, and we will address it through an addendum, and that'll be posted to the Ariba Discovery page or with the sourcing event to communicate any information to all potential bidders. If the city decides to make, or the city makes the decision not to change the requirement, you can then determine if you want to submit a bid still or if you want to pass on the opportunity. Follow all instructions and use all the templates included in the sourcing event, and ensure you provide all documents requested in the event. Sometimes we'll attach different forms or Excel spreadsheets that need to be completed. Make sure that you're completing them and also submitting those back in the same format. This just helps us do our evaluations a little bit quicker, which is why we send those out in our bids. And again, make sure you submit your bid on time. Like I said, SAP Ariba will not accept bids after the closing time and the closing date. The system actually shuts it down and will not receive any more submissions after the clock hits 0. And if you do participate in an RFP with the city and you are either successful or not successful, you can request a debrief from us where we'll sit down with you and we'll go through your bid and tell you where you did things very well and where you fell short on a few things. So we do have that feedback meeting, and we do go through the bid and provide some feedback to you on how you can improve your bids for the future. Some other documents that are referenced in a sourcing event may include the Sustainable Purchasing Policy and the Supplier Code of Conduct. In 2019, City Council approved an updated Sustainable Purchasing Policy for the city, which addresses environmental, social, and ethical consideration. This allows for the City of Edmonton to reward suppliers for leadership and innovation and sustainability, and ensures we are encouraging sustainable practices wherever possible. This covers purchasing from local companies when possible, but this is only explicitly possible under trade agreement thresholds. The Contractor's Environmental Responsibilities Package stems from the city's ISO 14001 environmental management system called Enviso, and it outlines the city's requirements and expectations related to environmental issues that may arise during the work. For example, what needs to happen if there's a chemical spill. All successful bidders for service work are required to sign an acknowledgement stating that they will abide by the regulations set out in that package. And the next item is the Supplier Code of Conduct, which is a document that holds city suppliers to minimum social, environmental, and ethical standards. By submitting a bid, companies agreeing to following the Supplier Code of Conduct. Another document that may be found in the sourcing event documents related to sustainability is the Sustainability Leadership Questionnaire, where you have the opportunity to respond to questions regarding your company's individual sustainability efforts. Sourcing events may also include, or will also include, articles referencing lobbying and conflict of interest. So with the RFPs, there is no lobbying. If you are participating in an active RFP and it's posted to the market, bidders, employees, agents, advisors, and representatives must not engage in any lobbying to sway the decision of the evaluation committee in any way. That includes not contacting the evaluation committee members. If we have a consultant on the project, not contacting them, trying to get them to sway the decision, or contacting the mayor or city councilors during an active procurement. In terms of the conflict of interest, we do have a section in all our sourcing events that asks for disclosure of any conflict of interest. And we break down the different financial interests, making sure that there's no collusion with suppliers, and ensuring that any relatives and family members of city employees or civic agencies don't have an interest in the company bidding. Any conflict of interest that is disclosed doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be disqualified from bidding. We just review it to make sure that, if there is a conflict of interest, that it's mitigated somehow or eliminated before we even consider disqualifying anybody. So in conclusion, as the question was asked before about networking with city staff, so if you're looking at a competitive procurement that's posted into the market, be careful about networking with city staff on that particular competitive procurement, because that could be considered lobbying to some degree. But definitely do network with city staff about other opportunities that are below the trade agreement thresholds, and definitely try and sell your services to them and trying to get them to pick you for any work under those thresholds. Do check SAP Ariba and the APC for any opportunities. Like I said, any competitive opportunity that we're posting are going to be posted on those sites. So definitely sign up. It's free to sign up for both of them. So you can create a free account. You can set up notifications for different services that you provide. So if we've selected that service as our commodity, it'll trigger you and send you an email saying, hey, the City of Edmonton has posted something in this area. And Roger, I'm going to pass it back to you.
Once I unmute. Thanks, Michael. So thanks everyone for joining us today, and certainly appreciate the opportunity to share this information. With some of the questions, or if you have questions and are having trouble figuring out which of the 14,000 employees to talk to, you can reach out. My email address is here, and you can reach out to our group, and we can help to guide you. And I think we're going to open it up to some questions if there's anything further.
All right, so we did get a few questions about who do I talk to for my particular industry. So is it okay for our webinar attendees to email you directly?
Yeah, that's fine. I think that's probably the easiest. The other option is, like I mentioned, on edmonton.ca, there is a contact or a corporate directory where you can look up people individually, but I appreciate that could be challenging. So feel free to contact me.
Okay, so I have located the corporate procurement and supply services contact page. So I'm going to drop that into our chat. And Roger, can I grab your email one more time to share in the
yes,
chat?
it's roger.lockwood@edmonton.ca.
Great, so that's in the chat as well. Now we have a question. Can you please give us some examples in your experience of a company selling services to the City of Edmonton from the start to them successfully selling? So maybe just a couple of points of maybe a business that we might have heard of, how they found you guys and what went through. Or is that something that would take too long to answer?
No, hopefully I understand the question correctly. In my experience, a lot of it comes through competitive procurements. So we have a lot of new companies that'll find our opportunities on, like I said, Alberta Purchasing Connection or Ariba, and they'll just submit a bid through there and go through the evaluation process. And if they're selected, then they get selected and get a contract with the city.
Okay, great. Who do I talk to about procurements under the 25,000 non-competitive? Who is the direct contact for that?
That again would be similar to networking with the right business areas within the city. So depending on what kind of business you have and what kind of services you're selling, specific branches might need those services. So those are the branches you want to reach out to and chat with them.
Okay, so find the branch, and same thing for under 75,000. Can they directly contact the person?
Yep.
Fantastic.
And like it was mentioned before as well, if you're not sure, you can reach out to myself or Roger, and we can kind of help you navigate the city's org chart.
Okay, great. And then we did want clarification on where correctional services fits. Is that Edmonton Police Services or is that City of Edmonton?
Ooh, it's definitely not the City of Edmonton.
Okay.
Yeah, no, we don't have correctional. So EPS, Edmonton Police Services, is on its own.
Okay.
They report to council, but also to police commission. Correctional services, more in terms of facilities, that would be provincial. What the City of Edmonton has is we have not correctional officers, but peace officers. So transit peace officers by law. The Parks and Roads has peace officers for the parks facilities and such, but nothing really on the correctional side of things.
Okay, Ambreen, I hope that answers your question. You might need to watch for one of our webinars on selling to the province of Alberta. Now we have one. Does the Communications and Engagement Department host RFPs for photo video services, or is that something small where they would have to contact directly?
Actually, interesting with them, because I actually did that RFP for them. They've set up standing arrangement type agreements with a variety of different suppliers in that field. So they already have contracts set up, but they do go out every now and then. I think it's every year they review their current lists, and if they need to make any adjustments to that list, whether it's replacing suppliers or adding new suppliers, they will post an RFP on Alberta Purchasing Connection. So definitely do keep an eye out, because those opportunities can come up, once a year, at least for right now.
All right. Does Business Link, oh, this is a question for me. Do we offer similar webinars about how to find bidding opportunities with the province? We definitely do with the Government of Canada. There are some recorded webinars on there right now. And I just came back from mat leave, so I do not remember if we do have them with the province. I may have misspoken earlier, but we'll get that information for you right away. And as always, check out our website for recorded webinars and for upcoming ones, so you don't miss anything. All right. On what basis does the City of Edmonton pick a particular bidding? Is it just on the pricing and services, or something else too? I'm gonna guess that it is specific to each RFP. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, there's a lot of factors that go into, what process we use and what kind of, document we're going to use, whether it's a tender, RFP, pre-qualification. It really depends on the type of procurement, the type of service, how much knowledge we already have on that particular commodity. There's a lot of factors that go into it.
Okay, and we did get confirmation that we do have webinars with selling to the province, buying and selling from the province. So we've got all 3 levels of government covered if you subscribe to our newsletter and check out our website. And currently, yes, 2 recorded webinars on selling to the Government of Canada. So hopefully you guys are able to access the resources you need. Do we have any more questions for our 2 presenters today? I do have another specific question about selling to EPS K9 under 10 to 25. That would be contacting them directly? Yeah, confirmation. Okay, I'm going to open up my thank you page to thank our hosts and everyone who has come in. Thank you, Roger and Michael, for presenting. If you want to contact us at BusinessLink, please email askus@businesslink.ca or call 1-800-272-9675. If you're looking for one-on-one advice or want to sign up for our newsletter, connect with us on social media, chat with us online, view recorded webinars, or stay informed on upcoming webinars, workshops, or events, please visit businesslink.ca if I haven't mentioned that enough. And after you're done here, you will get an email with a link to an online survey about this webinar. Please complete the survey. It helps us make sure that we are getting the information you need out to you. And then if you need to refer back to anything, there will be a recording on businesslink.ca. So thank you everyone for coming. And I hope you all have an excellent day and success in your businesses.